Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, as we enter an entirely new age, a new age of technologies that are based on your consciousness energies, it is time to really work on how you are thinking and acting and what you've been brainwashed with. And one of the problems is that I call is living in an urban legend. Are you living in an urban legend? And of course, a legend is something basically that's made up. There may be some truth in it, but it's been twisted and bent and stomped upon by many people. And this is how most people get their education. Now, very few people read anything or do any kind of research. We're all busy and we don't really have all that much time, and we may depend on people that are supposed to know. The bottom line is they don't know. And you're going to get a lot of misinformation because they are living in an urban legend and they're interpreting it from a pretty messed up way. But you are giving them authority in your life because you're kind of lazy. And secondly, well, shouldn't they know? That's why I'm going to this school. That's why I'm listening to this so-called expert. And all of this is pretty bad. And even if you do some research, you have to be careful to understand, well, is the information or the expert you're getting information from someone you can trust? And again, good luck. Very few people are able to overcome their personal biases. So I always like to investigate when I listen to somebody or get information, read a book, however you get your information. I kind of like to figure out, well, who is this person and what are their biases? You can start off by, do they believe in a religion? Are they from a particular culture? I think this helps. And when I read something, then I can understand better if they're coming from a bias. You're going to find that biases are added into anything and everything. So if a person is a quote scientist and they have a fictional belief system in some religious form, well, you've got a serious problem there. How can you call yourself a scientist when you are believing in things that are completely comic book made up? So there's a problem there. And if you strongly believe in anything, that's going to color your belief and they're going to add into it. I remember the people in alternative science have heard of the Rodin coil. Now, Rodin was an interesting guy, and a lot of people like his coil. It's been around for years. He wrote a little book. And of course, the last third of the book was all about his Baha'i faith. I don't know how active the Baha'is are now, but it's always been a small one. But apparently he married a wealthy woman who was Baha'i, and he put all of that into his book. Now, I guess that's up to the person, but you're moving from the subject matter, which means this person is then interpreting things through a particular focus. And that focus is going to be then blurred to what the real truth is. But if you know about it, of course, you can be forearmed of what's going on there. And you should always read things skeptically. Who's writing it? Where does it come from? This is very important so you don't live in the urban legend. Now, what you hear from everybody is biased, and what you get from educational institutions is all been screened. Teachers oftentimes are told what to teach. I don't know if it's still the case, but it used to be that all the school books in the United States were basically edited and screened in Texas, who was known for a lot of errors in actually school books. At one time, there was a whole list of what was in school books, which were just wrong. And most likely the teacher didn't bother. And most teachers are pretty poor. Teachers can't teach. Generally, people become teachers because they're lazy and incompetent. Those who can't teach is the old saying. And there's a lot of truth in that. So there's a problem. So I've never found a quality teacher from kindergarten up to graduate school. I didn't find any good teachers. There are some teachers that were interesting, fun, etc., but they were terrible. And I found the fact that they actually made some horrible misstatements and they didn't bother to get the facts. And of course, they don't update anything either. So they're not updating, they're not looking for it. Most teachers, as I said, are pretty lazy. It's an easy job, particularly when you get out of, once you get into high school and other things, you have a lot of helpers. I'm not sure what they're doing. When you get into college, of course, most of them have a student assistants and they're involved in other research projects. So there's all sorts of things going on. And these people are paid extremely well for work that's pretty damn easy. Now, when you get into the base school, I guess grade 1 up to about, seventh grade, these are things that are basically, you're teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, basically. But they don't know how to teach either. What they should, first thing they should do with children is teach them how to learn. These are all the things. So that you're living an urban legend. You think teachers work really hard. Well, they work, some may work hard and they may put a wee bit of their own money in it. But the bottom line is they have no idea what they're doing. Never met a teacher that had any real qualifications. Teaching is an art, and there ain't much of that good art out there. But you live in that urban legend. Did you watch a movie? Ooh, that's a good place to get stuff from, because you're going to get all sorts of inaccuracies there. It is really endless when we get into that. Things like the Mel Gibson movie about William Wallace, Braveheart. At that particular time, nobody painted themselves blue. Now, some of the Celts were known for that, or some of the Scottish, but not in his time. I believe the actual dress that he was wearing there, his outfits, were wrong as well. Movies are not meant to be history, and it's very difficult to tell a story through a movie correctly. So generally, you're going to get things that didn't happen that are more exciting than the real world. So a lot of these things are just plain and simple done for shock effect to make the movie more interesting. So getting information on an important historical subject matter in what is generally an hour and a half to 2 hour movie is a big, big error. So, sometimes when you get these mini-series or out there that you may get some real history there in general. But it doesn't matter what it is. And we've got things that are considered fact that you probably bet your life on that are just complete bogus. There's also information that changes. Now, if you're not changing your opinions, and particularly your belief opinions, now, you may have a core that hasn't changed. I don't believe my core has changed in terms of my morality and understanding of the world, but you have to also not only have facts and figures, you've got to know how to interpret the information that you get. So, and this is another problem with Dummadamia and all the rest of the institutions, is can they really interpret the information that they have properly? So you get new information, and do you know what that means? Well, this again is almost 100% failure with anyone out there. They can't interpret the information properly. So they get information in, and they add it into their own screwed up belief system to begin with. So it just goes on and on with this pretty sad and pathetic reality that we call education. Now, most of the facts are not hidden. You can go out and read books and look it up, and you can find all sorts of details that were never taught you because they weren't exciting enough, or they didn't place a particular person, place, or thing in a good light. All of those things that go with that, and these oftentimes are recorded at different political times. People like General MacArthur. Now, MacArthur, who was famous for retreating, because that I shall return, well, that means he retreated, and they gave him credit when he was really a horrible general. And it comes now out to be fact that where he was thought to have been very successful in World War I was a fantasy and a lie. And of course, people, instead of going after MacArthur for his failure to protect the Philippines and getting 100,000 men captured and him fleeing to Australia, because war was on, they gave him a medal. Well, I don't think that's appropriate, but that's what people are doing again, it's all politicalized. And I've seen movies made on him. I think it was, who was that actor? Gregory Peck played him in a movie. And of course, when you look at movies of people, generally they're written to be positive and don't point out anything negative. And of course, it made him look like a great hero when he was probably one of the worst generals of all time. And of course, he had a romantic image, and even the public really liked him when he was a terrible general. But you don't know that because that's not what the reporting said. This also goes into all sorts of health subjects. What's good for you? What's the latest thing? The miracle herb. I remember when it was coral calcium. Everybody lived long in Okinawa, part of Japan, because of coral calcium, which of course was totally bogus. Coral calcium isn't even in any way whatsoever digestible. It's a rock and you can't digest it. So you're getting nothing from it. And it goes on, and that the reason people lived long was that, not the fact that this was Japanese society that in itself tends to live long, and of course they tend to have other particular diets. But people think that the only thing the Japanese eat is sushi and and rice. It's just not true. They eat a lot of pork. The Japanese tend to drink a lot and drink a lot of hard alcohol. They drink, the average Japanese drinks 2 or 3 ounces of hard alcohol every week. Something probably shocks you. Now, there's a lot of reasons why people may or may not live longer. Another fallacy, of course, is Sardinia, the Mediterranean diet, and they tend to live long. Well, basically, who lives the longest are those mountain people, and they have a particular, in Sardinia, they have a particular diet, generally eating cheeses and meats that are from sheep and goats. And they tend to drink a lot of olive oil, apparently. What they don't leave out is they live very long. And what they left out is they also smoke a lot of cigarettes. Whoops. So these are the kind of things that are never filled in, just like, and then again, you could look at the famous story of Hunza, where people claim to live really long. Well, and they said they lived really long and didn't get all these diseases because they were drinking a type of water. This was pushed by Flanagan, who died himself fairly young, claiming to have some sort of toxicity from mercury. Certainly couldn't get that out of his system. But the bottom line is that it had absolutely nothing to do with the water. But he was selling drops and other things and wrote a whole book on water so he could make a lot of money from it. I used his drops for many, many years. Zero, absolutely nothing, just garbage in a plastic little squeeze bottle for $50. So Patrick Flanagan, as far as I'm concerned, has no credibility whatsoever. He's also did work for the Navy, where he trained dolphins as weapons, which I find very immoral. But that's just another thing that just shows you can't really trust people. And of course, he's another one with a great reputation, boy genius, whatever. So these are the kind of things that you don't quite understand. Hunza, and of course, then they tried to link in yogurt and everything else. But what it appears is that they fast for an entire month on using apricots. And there are a few other things. They're also very pagan. They have animal sacrifices and many other things you've never heard about. But let's keep it clean because we don't want to go into all the other things. Now, whether any of that stuff is true or not, we don't know because it's very difficult to get birth certificates that go back 100 or 2 years, 100 or 120, whatever it is, because they didn't even keep records back then. So these are the facts that nobody really gets. But you live in the urban legend. You heard that. Somebody said that. It was on a news report. It was on 60 Minutes or wherever you got your information from. And it's just hearsay passed on or used actually in a deceptive way because you want funny, positive news. So people report it. Most doctors don't know how to read research reports, so they read the same thing that everybody else does, and to make sure they have a YouTube video, they're going to read right off of the research report, which they don't quite understand to begin with. And they're going to quote whatever it says on there, because is that valid? Are research reports valid? Is the actual place we get it from? Well, this is why you're living in an urban legend, because of the fact that none of this is valid. All you've got to do is punch in on YouTube research fraud, and you will get hundreds of videos stating the fraud that was committed not by some little company so they can sell their coral calcium or their garlic, but these are done by all the top universities, Harvard, MIT, Caltech. We can go through the entire Ivy League schools that the research they did was found to be fraudulent. Harvard was even bought off by the food companies to demonize fat and to make sugar good for you. when it's absolutely the opposite. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with regular fat. That is animal fat and so forth. Of course, there are fats that are bad for you. So we're talking about regular clean fats from meats and other things. They always told you, don't eat red meat, it's too high in fat. There's nothing wrong with that fat. It's loaded with nutrients. But you don't know that because you've heard different. Of course, this was all the fraud that went out there. The entire diets that everybody has now is fraud. And now everybody's in a giant confused state. And we have you can pretty much find on YouTube and anywhere else that you can find the exact opposite of what anybody says. Fat is good for you. Fat is bad for you. Salt is horrible. Salt is good for you. The point is that these are all fantasies and lies that were put out there by companies to sell you things. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Most of the time in history, nobody ate breakfast. Breakfast was never something that people took the time to eat, or is it in any way a necessity meal for you? This started later, and particularly when corporations decided to have particular breakfast foods, things like bacon. Nobody ate bacon for breakfast until it was heavily promoted. Things like coffee is bad for you. Well, haven't you heard that through most of your youth? We don't give coffee to the kids. It's not good for them. Well, of course, this is nonsense. This was perpetrated by when coffee substitutes came out. I believe it was Sanka, one of the most famous ones in the United States, and they demonized coffee, saying, oh, it's bad for you. Don't give it to children. Drink this. This becomes an urban legend that coffee is bad for you. When coffee generally is good for you, or at least they're telling you it is, we never really know because we can't trust the research, but certainly there's nothing wrong with caffeine. Caffeine is just a stimulant, but of course it certainly is addictive and can be bad for you if you drink too much of it. So it's like everything else. Then we get into, is it good, is it not, how much, etc. So we get into the urban legend nonsense again. So you have to be very careful what you believe in general, because most likely it's wrong. What I do is I look up all sorts of subject matter that I think I know, and then I find some very interesting details. And even if you look on Seweropedia, a pretty bad place to get a lot of information from, but certainly if it's not a subject that's in contention, things like, of course, psychic abilities and certain other things, if it's not in contention, which of course Seweropedia messes all that up because it has a bunch of frauds on there putting lies up, but if it's something kind of simple, you can get a lot of information there. Where did people go? Where are they from? I always find it amusing when people say, well, this person who came from here. Well, it's really not true at all. And a lot of people have what are modern borders are not necessarily where that person was born initially. So it's quite interesting. I believe it was Wilhelm Reich who basically was born in Ukraine. He was not Austrian or German, like a lot of people want to state he is. If I have him right, but I mean that's how you look things up. These people are blanketly name something, and of course a lot of things are just done deliberately. People claim people that they have nothing to do with, and of course you don't know the facts behind it because people don't tell you that. Again, you're living in an urban legend. It's the same old story as we get into most anything like this. So you have to be very careful of what you believe and what you think the facts are in life. There are many gross things that people don't understand, like the fact of white people. Who's white people? Well, the point is that the people you think are white, or who have races claim, are not. People like the Germans, they're Aryans, they come from Iran. These are people that are basically Middle Easterners, and that's where Aryans, and they claimed it, not me. So the whole idea is that's the reality of it. So the point is they're not white people, they are Aryans. Where do white people come from? And that's another terminology that people don't quite understand. The Caucasian mountains, they used to call white people Caucasians because, there's nobody who's really white out there. That's another misnomer in itself, slang nonsense. But people that want to use that and claim this kind of what heritage are they claiming? And you don't understand it. These are the kind of things that get very confused and no one quite understands it. But it's certainly amusing when you get into that all these races who think they're, quote, white are basically following people that come from Persia, Iran. Iran means Aryan, and that's where the Aryans come from. They are basically from the Middle East. And of course, they hate being called Arabs, but Arabs means someone from the Middle East as a slang. So these are all the things you don't understand. As I said, getting back to fat, the bottom line is everybody thinks fat is bad for you. It's not. Eggs will kill you. You eat more than 3 eggs, it's going to clog. Well, not true at all. There are people eating 10, 15 eggs a day and have no problem whatsoever, particularly if they're on the proper diet. The eggs, which are natural cholesterol, the body handles without a problem. So, and for most people, especially if they're not eating a whole bunch of other junk, if you eat eggs, you have no problem. Of course, this can be checked by your doctor, etc. When it comes to diet and everything else, these things become very individualistic, and that's another problem. What is good for one person may not be good for you. You may find something. I mean, there's people that eat pounds of peanut butter weekly. Another person who eats just one peanut, they could die from it. So these are the other things as well. So you have to take the information that's out there and then accommodate it to your own personal life. But you have to be very careful because everyone is living in an urban legend. I'm sure there are many things in your life that you would literally swear on your life that you are 100% wrong with. And that's frightening in general because there are so much of this in your life that you don't really have an opinion that is worth anything. And you have to be very careful to make sure you check things out. Is that really the fact? And in this day and age, it is very easy to check things out thanks to the internet. So you can punch something in the internet and you can get information back on it instantly. You don't have to go to the library. You don't have to grab your encyclopedias. You don't have to look through reference guides. You can punch it in and get relatively good information. Again, Wikipedia, or I call it as Sewerpedia, is questionable in many areas. In other areas, it's not because, certain scientific facts are scientific facts, certain chemicals, other things. So you could probably say that 90% of Sewerpedia is probably relatively reliable. But that's not the only source. So you can jump around to many other places. So if you want to find out the benefits of vitamin D, etc., well, you can punch that in and get some pretty reliable information. And of course, there's all sorts of free resources when it comes to anything, or very low cost. I mean, you could build an entire library of information by using your basically Kindle, which allows you to have access monthly to hundreds of thousands of books on any subject you can think of. And usually there are multiple books on a subject. So if you want to find out about vitamin D, you probably find 50 or 60 books on Kindle that if you really want to do research, you can do it all there and actually read an entire book on it. And of course, there are many sources that are completely free. Kindle's like $13 a month or whatever, but you can get 100% free sources as well. So it's all there, but you have to be inquisitive and you can't really believe that what you know is valid whatsoever. Because everybody has lied to you, some deliberately, other ones that have passed on misinformation, and this is a classic problem that we find in all teachings. So, and of course, things are always updated. What may have been valid 10, 20 years ago is now not valid whatsoever. We found out how basically bad carbohydrates are and fructose are, which were always told you was wonderful. Eat all the bread you want when basically it's an empty calories of nothing more than sugar. But it's part of your culture. And of course, nothing tastes good unless it's on a slab of bread. So it's one of those things out there that we have to be careful of. And most people don't know anything. I recently read a small little paragraph on somebody who said he was getting on a better diet out there. And he mentioned as one of the foods that he's going to eat a better diet was SpaghettiOs. So this certainly is not good pasta in general. And of course, being in cans that have plastic inserts in them, we run into problems. But this is, people are just ignorant that way. They don't come from families or from people that care about those things. This is a area of education and even, I guess you could call class. I mean, some of these people think that McDonald's is a health food restaurant. So it's just a lot of misinformation. I mean, this guy actually thought that him eating canned food, he was stopping eating bad stuff by grabbing fast food. The fast food may have been better than the canned food. So these are all the things that, well, you don't know because you've never studied it. And you're not going to get good information from hardly any place. The only person that I know who is fair and does the research and is unbiased is myself. The bottom line is I can't find anybody else out there that is telling you the truth or is educated enough in the subject matter they are talking about. They're just giving you the urban legend that they've been brainwashed in, and they're passing that on to you as fact. That's pretty scary and pretty dangerous. So, he who is on the consciousness trail, he who wants to manifest in life what they desire, and they need to know what is happening, and they need to know truth so you can pursue truth, because truth in the end pays off. Until next time.